Birds of Prey, issue 5, Chuck Dixon writing with Greg Land on the art. After the cliffhanger, of course, of the Machakahata lake monster.
Makachitahu.
There's too many syllables, damn it.
Yeah.
What have we done anyway? I do like that Babs actually cracks a little joke about it as well when she's like saying it wrong.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the last issue quite a bit, and this obviously we get a couple of fun pages to start with. Dinah diving away from this sea monster, and the Gary, the hatless guy who was all sort of like nervous around her before. Sort of comes out with the old man with a shotgun, and she gives him a kiss on the cheek, and he's like, "Whoa!" And it's like the best day of his life. So really fun stuff though. She wakes up Babs by saying, "Hey, there's a goddamn monster here. Help me now!" And we also see the ravens who, very bizarrely, when they come up from the water, find a volcano instead of the hotel and the lake house and whatnot.
Yeah, it's unusual.
It's very unusual. They're not expected to go that route, and maybe suggest that the monster may actually be real and came from wherever they've now went to. Was my first thought.
Yeah, that's what I did too.
And then we come back to the other subplot we've got going here, which is the over the top guy from the Pentagon who's determined to find this hacker. Who they're really making us think it's Babs throughout this issue. Because they track the location to like Gotham, Bloodhaven, or
yes, the Gotham Bloodhaven corridor is what they used.
And then at the end, of course, like one of the cliffhangers is Babs saying, "Is that a helicopter overhead?" I've kind of enjoying this silly little subplot. Even in here where he starts talking at one point about how he made up a fake study about married officers working and serving together, and it's like, oh, there was no study.
It was the combat readiness of married versus unmarried personnel.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
I enjoyed this plot a lot more in this this issue than I have in recent issues. I think because I actually got a sizable chunk of it here. I don't know, there was 2 different sections of it, each 2 or 3 pages long, as opposed to I think last issue it just popped up for 1 page and it just felt really fleeting and like it was just gone.
I just like
give me enough to actually get a chunk of.
I just like how enthusiastic he is. There's that shit-eating grin he's got when he says about the funds. He's like, just the funds for it. The site didn't exist. We're going to catch this person. We're going to do it. And even later on when he's like, "Hey, I'd give you a promotion, but this is really off the books, so I can't." But
yeah.
So and then a couple of Cobra agents storm in to the cabin and attack Dinah.
Yeah, this has one of my least favorite moments of the art. Of Land's stuff so far.
Is this when she's diving back and the gunfire's firing around her? Yeah.
Well, no, actually. Sorry. It's when she's sliding out from under the bed on the next page.
Right.
The action of it, like, it took me a couple of seconds to actually figure out what was going. Like you see her grab their legs and then and swing herself out. In the second panel is where she comes shooting out, but I don't know. It's something about her face, maybe the way she looks really stiff. It looks a bit unnatural, and I didn't quite get the movement of it, the motion. It felt really stilted, which is weird because I think Land's forte has been the action up till this point in this book.
Maybe it's just a really awkward movement because it's very unnatural to the point where I don't even buy she could do this without like baby oil already being on her back to slide properly.
Honestly, I think it probably doesn't help that the 2 guys aren't really reacting because she has like a hand on each of their legs and then uses that to drive herself forward, and it's not tripping them over at all. They seem to just be like, "Oh, where did you come from?" I think it's a combination of all these things that made this panel really kind of one of the worst panels from Land so far for me.
I think it may just be conceptually, it's just, like they tried something that's maybe a cool little action beat, and ultimately just that maybe it would work better in live action because in live action you would try it and say, "No, this looks stupid. It doesn't work. So how do we change it to make it work?" Whereas in art they just sort of did it, and it's like it looks a bit weird.
Could be.
Would be my kind of guess. But all fine. The Ravens seem to have traveled back in time.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There's a lot of bouncing around the things. There's three plots going on here. There's Dinah and Babs, and obviously them investigating. Dinah's with Gary at this point, saying, "Okay, how do I get a boat? How do I do this? Yada
Yeah.
yada yada."
Cheshire is giving the other Ravens shit, basically, being like, come on, you're supposed to be professionals.
Yeah, I think that's
Get it out of yourselves.
the issue. Felt very energetic to me because it was bouncing around these three really well defined plots. It felt like the helicopter's getting close to Babs, whilst Dinah's going scuba diving in the lake and looking for stuff.
It was really well paced in that regard, yeah.
Yeah.
Because each thing, it was rarely just one page. It was usually a couple of pages, or they transitioned really neatly if it was
Mhm.
just a short page. And all these things that kind of added up to feeling like it had a flow that sometimes this book hasn't necessarily had, for me at least.
Yeah, everything felt like it was sort of ramping up and coalescing, even though the actual plots themselves haven't combined yet. Yeah, and Dinah goes out to the boat, goes down, finds the satellite, and Babs is sort of looking into it. Dinah's like texting on her underwater tablet or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's not a tablet. It's not just a screen. It has got buttons there.
Yeah. What's
Um,
funny to me about this though is that she's writing like fairly lengthy sentences underwater, and all I could think was like, surely you'd want to type as quickly and as succinctly as you possibly could, not these long proper.
no, I agree.
Yeah.
It basically functionally treats them as narration boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a problem in that it gives us still just Dinah's full voice, right? Like the first box is fine. If I read it here, it just says found what they were diving for. That works fine.
Yeah.
But then the next one looks like a machine or something,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, you're getting too much now there.
I concur with that. And we're pretty much at the end of this shoot here, where the Ravens basically go, "How do we get home?" And this is where they're talking about neutrinos, which is where I'm sure you're going to talk about Star Trek, not Star Trek, sorry, Star Wars, because obviously Webb says like the Force.
Yeah. Cheshire says, physicists think they bind the universe together. And she goes, like the Force. And you hinted in a Flash review, it felt very midichlorians esque. Obviously, this predates that.
Yeah.
But I think it's just based off the line from the A New Hope, where it's everyone talking about the Force. It binds us, surrounds us. Connects all living things. I think is the line.
Hmm.
Maybe slightly misquoting, but that's the general gist of it. I think it's supposed to be a reference just to that line in general. I think.
Are you even a Star Wars fan? Not even getting the quote right.
I'm sorry for not getting the exact quote of everything. I'm not
Dear.
trained for this.
Yeah, so it's like a three-pronged cliffhanger. We have the Ravens saying, "How do we get back?" Don't really know yet. Babs looking up saying, "Is that a helicopter I hear?" Which obviously ties into the subplot. And then Dinah's is the one that's the most kind of like,
Murky.
yeah, like, we see her swimming before up from the thing.
And you see the silhouette of what is presumably the
Tail.
Nessie tail. Yeah.
So it just ends with her, and I actually think the art here is really good on her face. Like I think her shock with the scuba gear on actually looks quite good. It's a good proper horror movie cliffhanger.
It's got a really interesting use of the pop art dots, which this book has not had at all. Yeah, they're all over the scuba outfit. In that final panel, to great effect.
Yeah, and I think the bubbles coming from the scuba gear as well. It gives it this in the hands in front of her. It's a really nice image. It's actually it says a lot on its own, without much. And the little speech bubble, of course, with just the noise of like because she can't speak, obviously.
Yeah, and this is because obviously Land is infamous for overusing reference shots.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously using reference shots are fine. It's encouraged. If you do it well, everyone does. They should be doing it to get things looking right.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for artists to actually take their own reference shots of them acting out like various poses for the sake of copying.
Absolutely, and it's fine to use other ones though if they're there, and as long as you're not overusing the same ones and they're contextually fitting.
I'll tell you this though, this given the pose and the look has to come from a real movie of some kind, right? And
Yes.
I feel way better about this being based on like a horror movie moment than I do about a lot of his stuff, which has been based on porn. I feel like taking the faces of porn stars and putting it into regular characters is a lot more
Yeah.
sleazy to me.
No, I agree, and this is kind of where I was getting at. Is this one? It feels like such a particular. Like I can see, I can't see the exact reference that he's taken from, but I can see the style of shot that is
Yeah,
used, right? And I think he's captured it really quite well.
yeah.
And this is referencing used to really strong effect, and not just generic referencing of everyday poses. This is a very specific it's almost a reference in itself in how it looks. It's an intentional calling to something.
I feel like this is one where if you had enough time to research it, you could probably find what it is.
Oh yeah,
If you wanted to sit down and look through, because I don't think it's like an obscure movie. This seems like something that's probably a mainstream classic movie.
it feels like something we've probably seen.
Yeah, it does. But none of this is a complaint. It looks fine. It looks good, even.
It looks good in the moment, and that's where it matters.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't like the idea of tracing, which he's been accused of doing with some of his more modern work, and I think the idea of him taking porn star heads and putting them into just random scenes with characters to make them seem sexier just feels super skeevy.
Yeah, it feels like he got worse over time because at least so far in this book, it hasn't been that bad.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've been saying that from the start that it's felt much better than these modern work. From about mid 2000 onwards, I'd say. Because I remember like when he did Iron Man, which was early 2010s. I know that was lambasted.
Yeah, it was about
for being
2011,
pretty
2012, I
bad.
think.
Yeah. So
That was terrible.
And he already had a reputation by then, so I assume it was during the 2000s that he transitioned
Must have been,
with his reputation. So hey ho, I thought it was a solid issue though.
Me too.
Moved everything forward. I liked all the plots simultaneously. It makes you feel there's a lot going on, and you feel like they're all going to. I mean, I don't know if the helicopter stuff with Babs is going to necessarily link into the other ones, but it's definitely going to be an interesting problem if it keeps her busy whilst Diana needs her help.
What's interesting about that is we've been assuming the whole time that the hacker isn't Babs, but her pen pal. I think it's interesting that if that is still the case, that the pen pal is closer than we had assumed.
Yeah, or he's just doing a really good job of tricking them into thinking this is where he is. Like he's sending them to Babs. That's a possibility.
Setting her up, yeah.
Yeah. Very possible. Very possible. All right, what are you giving this issue then?
I'm going to give this a solid 8. I think it's a really strong 8. Not quite the 8.5. It's just missing something, I think, to boost it up a little bit. Whereas it's really solid. Pacing's really all there. It's just, and all the cliffhangers are good, but none of them are spectacular on their own.
This is kind of like, it feels like a perfect example to me of why I like serialized comics. Is basically just, and maybe it's a bit of an insult. Some people don't like it can be compared to other media, but it just feels like a good TV show. I feel like I got a nice episode of something that I care about with characters that are going through things, and everything feels like it's got momentum and building to something else. So I'll also give it the 8, but mainly just through some of those nitpicks and the art, and
yeah,
that's basically it.